based on their chemical nature. We can classify them based on their functions. We can call them excitatory neurotransmitters, or we can call them as inhibitory neurotransmitters. And as I told you, neurotransmitters have to be studied in a cycle form, as where are they synthesized, where are they stored, where all they are released, what are their receptors, what are the effectors which are going to respond to them, how are they recycling, degradation is going to happen, how is the recovery of these neurotransmitters is going to happen, and some part of a neuropharmacology that we will study. So these are our objectives when we are trying to learn about the neurotransmitters. Fine. Whom do we call as a neurotransmitter? For a substance to be called as a neurotransmitter, there are certain criteria that this has to fulfill. First of all, the definition. So a neurotransmitter is a substance that is released by a neuron and that affects a specific target in a specific manner. See, specificity is one feature of synapse. Okay, so receptors, as we all remember, we were talking about sensory receptors. Here we are talking about is a chemical receptors which are present in the postsynaptic end. So we are telling that these neurons, there is some kind of specificity present where they are going to affect a specific target in a specific way. So specificity becomes a very big thing over here. A target can be either, who can be my target? For these neurotransmitters, my target can be another neuron, which will be the postsynaptic neuron, or maybe an effector organ itself, or maybe the glands like salivary glands or some gastric glands, vagus nerve coming and causing the secretion of these gland secretions, or maybe the muscles. That neuromuscular junction, I have got a neurotransmitter release, that is acetylcholine, which is going to cause the contraction of the muscles by making a muscle action potential. But for any substance, for any chemical substance to be called as neurotransmitter, it has to fulfill certain criteria. What are those criteria? It should be synthesized in the presynaptic neuron. So synthesis has to happen in the pre-end, should be present in the presynaptic terminal and released in sufficient amount to exert a defined action on postsynaptic neuron or gland. So they should be present in the presynaptic terminal. They have to be released in sufficient amounts to exert a defined action on the postsynaptic neuron or the gland. And when they are administered exogenously, means from outside, if it is released inside our body, it has a specific target organ, a specific action. When I administer this from outside, means exogenously, when we are administering it, they should mimic the action of the endogenous transmitter. So they are supposed to act in the similar way how an endogenous transmitter has to act. There should be specific mechanism. Now we have seen where is there to be synthesized. They have to be synthesized in the presynaptic neuron, that is here. They should be present in the presynaptic neuron and should be released in sufficient amount to cause a response in the postsynaptic end. They should mimic, if administered exogenously, similar as to what if they are present inside. Next, there should be specific mechanism for removing these substances from the synaptic cleft. Means there has to be a mechanism where they are either going to get the degradation done, recycling done, or reuptake done. Now, how are we going to classify the neurotransmitters? Neurotransmitters, as I told, according to the chemical nature, they are going to be classified in 3 different groups. One is called as the amino acids groups, other is the amines group, and the other is peptides group. So there are, we are going to classify numerous of the neurotransmitters which are present in our central nervous system under these 3 categories. Let us try to remember the basic ones, the important ones. GABA, glutamate, glycine. Okay, GABA, glutamate, and glycine. They all belong to amino acid group. So in this, GABA is an inhibitory neuron, glutamate is an excitatory neuron, and glycine is another inhibitory neurotransmitter. So they are going to be released from inhibitory neuron. They'll act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. Glutamate is going to act as an excitatory neurotransmitter. Glycine is going to act as an inhibitory neurotransmitter. How about amines? The most important ones which we have to remember is acetylcholine. At the neuromuscular junction, the neurotransmitter that is released is acetylcholine. Then comes the dopamine. Dopamine play a very important role in the connections between the basal ganglia nuclei and the cortex, where they are going to play an important role in fine regulation of the movement. So if there is damage to these dopaminergic nigrostrial pathway, this may lead to Parkinsonism. So this neurotransmitter is another important one with a specific mention to where if absent, they may cause Parkinsonism. Okay. Then comes the epinephrine. Epinephrine and norepinephrine, these two neurotransmitters are the one which we belong to the class where synaptic innervations, wherever there is a synaptic discharge, we may have either epinephrine release or norepinephrine release, depending on what is the site and what is the receptor present there. Then comes, but their activity is nearly same. They are released from the adrenal glands also. They are released from the synaptic ends also. Then comes the histamine, which is mostly, we know it as whenever you have an allergic reactions, histamine is released. So we take antihistaminic drugs which try to reduce the effects or symptoms of an allergy. But this also has an important role in our brain also. Then comes the serotonin, very important neurotransmitter. In psychiatric diseases, they are important, and their uptake, reuptake is going to get inhibited by the help of the drugs where you're trying to cause, SSRIs are there, which we call as. So we're going to learn more about the serotonins. So I hope that makes clear to you. Amino acids, very simple ones that you have to remember is GABA, glutamate, glycine. Amines, you have to remember acetylcholine, dopamine, epinephrine, norepinephrine, they come together. You can remember them, histamine and serotonin. Then comes the peptides. Now, under peptides category, the important ones is one we have to know is about substance P. Substance P is that which is released at the site when there is a pain perception. Okay, so nociceptors, they are going to release substance P at the synaptic level, and that's how we perceive it as a pain. That's an important factor for substance P. Other ones are somatostatin, neuropeptide Y, dynorphin, cholecystokinin. So these are mainly the GI hormones, these all are VIP, GIP, CCK. They all are GIP hormones, means they are found in your gastric glands. Now, studying the neurotransmitter systems. First is location of the neurotransmitters and synthesizing, sorry for the typo here, synthesizing enzymes. How do I know about it? How do I know where these neurotransmitters are synthesized? How do you know where they are located? So there are studies which, these are the two types of study they do. One is immunocytochemistry, another is in situ hybridization. These are the two ways that you can know where exactly is the location of these neurotransmitters and how are they synthesized? What are the synthesizing enzymes there? How do I know whether they are released or not released? I can go to the synapse, take a sample from the synaptic cleft, try to assess it. I can know where this is. Studying of synaptic mimicry is like I'm going to use an exogenous substance which is going to mimic the same action of my neurotransmitters. I may either have an agonist or antagonist, so I can know who is mimicking the action of which neurotransmitter is mimicking the action of which drug. Then we go for receptors. In to study of the neurotransmitter receptors, we can have neuropharmacological analysis where you can extract these receptors, try to know what is the chemical nature, what they are, what is the protein concentration and constructions and all that. You can go for molecular basis of it, or you can have ligand binding methods. So these are just the techniques. In your case, you don't have to go in detail about them. All you have to know is just to know that, okay, these are the methods which are used for studying the locations, for their release, for their action, and for their receptors. Now, immunocytochemistry. So this is one diagram where we are trying to tell what immunocytochemistry is. So we will inject a candidate. Here, the candidate of an experiment is our rabbit. So we are going to inject the neurotransmitter candidate here. then the body of this rat is going to produce and they will take this neurotransmitter which is coming exogenously. Maybe they'll recognize it as a foreign particle, and the body will react and form then antibodies against these antigens. So once those antibodies are formed in the blood, we withdraw the blood of that animal. So now the blood which we have withdrawn is rich with antibodies which are produced against these neurotransmitters. What do I do? So this is a neuron, this is a brain tissue section. So they have not yet labeled which is what. Okay. So we have unlabeled and labeled neuron containing the neurotransmitter candidate, for which we have actually now an antibody present for it. So once we bring this and try to introduce chemically into the brain sections, the neurotransmitter which is labeled for this particular antibody, this antibody will go and bind. These antibodies are having these visible markers. Maybe a radioactive substances will be attached with them so that you can easily detect them. So these are going to go there. They are going to bind. So these are the antibody, and this is the neurotransmitter candidate to which they will bind. So once they bind there, they will start emitting the radioactivity will be there, or emission will be there. You can have a scintillating X-rays, or you can have certain systems where you are going to, read up these emissions, and you will understand that this particular neurotransmitter is more concentrated in this neuron. Am I clear with the method of immunocytochemistry? I think you would have done. Has anybody done it anytime? Have you practiced it, anyone? Yes, Amrita. In situ hybridization. What is this in situ? See, we have talked about the techniques here. As how do we know where the neurotransmitters are localized? How are they synthesizing enzymes? So what are the two techniques we have used? One is immunocytochemistry. So the principle is that it is injected to the animal, and the animal reacts to that by producing antibodies, and that antibodies are tagged with some radioactive substances, or the one which is going to emit as a marker, visibly emitting marker. And once you pour this into the tissue section, brain tissue section, so areas wherever this neurotransmitter must be present, it's going to bind to its antibody. And since this antibody is having a marker attached to it, I can assess this marker and know that this is the area where this particular neurotransmitter is located. So this is how I can come to a conclusion about the location of the neurotransmitter. The other is called as in situ hybridization. What is this in situ hybridization? Where in situ hybridization, the strands of mRNA, which is consisting of nucleotides arranged in a specific sequence, each of these nucleotide will stick to one or the other complementary nucleotide. So definitely these nucleotides are in complementary to each other. And in the method of in situ hybridization, what is happening is we are introducing a synthetic probe. It's constructed containing a sequence of complementary nucleotide that will allow it to stick to the mRNA. So if we label the probe, so this is my strand of RNA, and this is my radioactively labeled probe, which is going to take the complementary nucleotides, the complementary nucleotides. It's kind of as if it's trying to copy the informations. It's like one more strand of mRNA. So this template which I have prepared, or the probe which I have labeled, what am I going to do? This labeled probe is going to tell me the location of the cells who will be having the mRNA will be revealed. So how we were going to reveal it? By autoradiography. So the neurons with proper mRNA are labeled, and only neurons with proper mRNA will get labeled, and they are going to come as clusters of white spots here, these white dots. So this is how I will know that this particular is the location for my neurotransmitter. Now coming to studying of synaptic mimicry, which we have done it, I was telling that I'm going to have another drug or another neurotransmitter who is going to have the similar action to what my neurotransmitter will do. So I will come to know, okay, this particular neurotransmitter has got this activity. In this method, we use microionophoresis. What is this microionophoresis? We are going to introduce a micropipette, which is having the drug, and we are going to apply this via the help of an electric current. And there will be a presynaptic neuron whom we are going to stimulate and a postsynaptic neuron. And here we are just making an electrical stimulation, but there is no neurotransmitter release. The neurotransmitter actually which we are going to introduce here will be the one which we are studying. So we can have those drugs introduced here and we are going to record the response here. Suppose I introduce here glutamate and I get an EPSP here. I say, okay, glutamate has got an excitatory effect. If I introduce glycine here and record an IPSP here, I mean, okay, what I have recorded is an inhibitory response, and that probably is due to the neurotransmitter which was inhibitory in nature. So the response is generated by the drugs that can be compared with the one which is being generated from my synaptic transmission. Now, there is neuropharmacology. So coming back again to the first slide, we have understood how we do the immunocytochemistry in situ hybridization, where we try to know what the location of neurotransmitter is and try to know about the synthesizing enzyme. Then we want to study the neurotransmitters release. Obviously, we can know with the blockers, or we may extract and we can take it. Then we can know the synaptic mimicry we can do by how I have shown you. You can just introduce the drug, response can be recorded, or you stimulate the nerve and response can be recorded. I have a similar response. I say this is this particular drug, which is excitatory in nature. Then studying of receptors. How do I know the postsynaptic receptors? So we can have it with the help of neuropharmacological analysis, ligand binding methods, and molecular analysis. So this is what we are going to study. The neuropharmacology of cholinergic synaptic transmission. So when we go cholinergic, the word cholinergic is for acetylcholine. Wherever the neurotransmitter involved is acetylcholine, we call that neurotransmitter system as cholinergic system or cholinergic neuron. The neuron which is going to release acetylcholine, we'll call it as cholinergic neuron. Then comes here, we can have agonist, antagonist, receptors. So with the help of these drugs, we introduced a drug called nicotine. And we found, since acetylcholine is believed to be having two types of receptors, we don't know what is this receptor which we are about to study. So what do? I give nicotine, okay, and I give muscarinic. If it is a nicotinic receptors, it is going to get stimulated whenever I am, whenever I am giving the nicotine. So nicotine is going to act my agonist. It's going to have the similar action as to my acetylcholine. So this receptor, I label it as nicotinic receptor. If it is having the same action as acetylcholine, but the neurotransmitter to which they are responding now is not nicotine, but to muscarinic. So we call such type of receptors as muscarinic receptors. So with the neuropharmacological study, it has been found that acetylcholine, actually the receptor for acetylcholine, it exists in two forms. One is the nicotinic receptors and the other is muscarinic receptors. Then what are the inhibitors? So agonists are your nicotine and muscarinic. Nicotine for nicotinic receptor, muscarine for muscarinic receptor. What is the antagonist for this? How are we the one which is going to have an opposite action to what I am going to do, which is going to inhibit but not stimulate? So for nicotinic, it is curare. So curare is one drug like tubo curare and all that. This is one such type of drug which was present in, it used to be like a poison which were used by the African pygmies. So these tribals, whenever they used to fight, they used to use arrow and bow. So they used to, put these curares in the tip of the arrows. And these curares, what they used to do? They used to go and block the nicotinic receptors. And if they block the nicotinic receptors, acetylcholine effect will not be there. So they may cause the muscle paralysis because acetylcholine is going to act through the nicotinic receptors. So once these curares go and they kind of block these receptors, what are they going to do? They're going to cause muscle paralysis. And paralysis of the respiratory muscle will lead to respiratory distress and the person used to die. So this is the story of curare. Then what is atropine? Atropine is also a postsynaptic, or you can say this receptor blocker. Atropine acts as a receptor blocker for muscarinic receptors. Muscarinic receptors are usually found in the cardiac muscles. So when we give atropine, we will not have the effect of acetylcholine present there. You give atropine and then give acetylcholine, there will not be any effect on the heart. Normally, what is the effect of acetylcholine onto the heart? Since acetylcholine is a neurotransmitter of of parasympathetic neuron, so parasympathetic stimulation is going to inhibit the heart rate. So this inhibition of heart rate due to parasympathetic stimulation is usually brought about by the acetylcholine muscarinic receptors. When I use atropine, atropine will go and bind to these postsynaptic receptors and it is going to block it. And when it blocks it, even though you have this acetylcholine, even if you give a parasympathetic stimulation, what will you find? You will see that there is no decrease in the heart rate. That means acetylcholine effect is not there. Am I clear to you, all of you here? Okay. What do you see there? What do you get to see there is that there are receptors present. What is that? One is the nicotinic receptor, the other is the muscarinic receptors. So I can have nicotinic receptors, I can have muscarinic receptors for the same neurotransmitter. So I can have a different effect. Maybe they are differently associated in different types of areas. They may be like, as I told, muscarinic is rich in the cardiac muscle, nicotinic is rich in the skeletal muscle. So that's one way of studying the neurotransmitters. Next, okay. Can anybody remember this diagram? I'll just give you a minute for it. First of all, let me know what type of transmission is here. What type of activity is going on here? I understand from here. So we'll go back. Is this slide very visible to everybody?
Yes.
So what we are talking about is the synthesis and storage of a peptide neurotransmitter. So how many types of neurotransmitters do we have based on the chemical nature?
Three, ma'am.
3. Okay, what are those?
Amines,
amines and peptides.
And the third one?
Peptides.
Okay. So can you give me some examples?
GABA, glutamate and glycine are amino acids. Acetylcholine, dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, epinephrine and histamine are examples of amines. And peptides, I
just remember one of them, substance P, neuropeptide, cholecystokinin, CCK. So all those are peptides. Now what are we talking about here is, we are talking about the synthesis of peptides. So let me just tell you here itself. The neurotransmitters like amino acids and amines, most of them are synthesized at the vesicle itself. Okay? They are not synthesized in the cell body. They are synthesized at the synaptic vesicles also, means at the synaptic terminal itself. Do you remember the synaptic terminal? If we have an axon gives a button-like structure which forms the synapse and we call it as synaptic terminal. So most of the neurotransmitters are synthesized if they are of what nature? Amino acids and amines. But for the peptides, the synthesis doesn't occur here. It rather takes place in the cell body. Cell body, why? In the soma, why? Because it has got all the cellular structures which are required for the synthesis of the protein. Like it has the ribosomes, it has rough endoplasmic reticulum, it has Golgi apparatus, and all those systems, what all are required for my protein synthesis, all the mechanism or the machineries are present in the cell body. So what is happening here is, so we have the first step. What is the first step? A precursor peptide is synthesized in the rough endoplasmic reticulum. This is rough endoplasmic reticulum. A precursor peptide is synthesized here. Then this precursor peptide is split in the Golgi apparatus. to yield an active neurotransmitter. So it's kind of, a process of synthesis. So we have these precursor peptide, which is having the neurotransmitter with it. Now the active peptide neurotransmitter is separated in the Golgi apparatus. Now these, and the third one, secretory vesicles containing the peptides bud off. So these are the secretory vesicles. They are going to get filled up with the active peptide neurotransmitters, and they're going to bud off from the Golgi apparatus, and they're going to travel along the axon through the exoplasm present there, and then they're going to reach here in the terminal, and they remain into the vesicles. That's the story for peptides. What is the story for amine and amino acids? For amines and amino acids, the enzymes which are required for conversion of a precursor molecule from the raw molecule into a neurotransmitter molecule is present in the cytosol itself. It's present here itself. And then once they are synthesized with the help of the transmitter proteins, they'll get into the synaptic vesicles, and they will remain there in the synaptic vesicles for a long period of time until there will be, there will be some pocket release here and there at the resting stage, which we know. But once a signal comes, there will be massive release of these synaptic vesicles. Is there any questions right here? So this is a picture which is showing the way the synthesis and storage is going to happen for the different types of neurotransmitters. So chemically, we know there are 3 types of neurotransmitters. One is amino acids, other is amines, and the last one is the peptides. Peptides being very heavier type of substances, they don't get synthesized at the terminals. Their synthesis occurs here at the cell body. They are synthesized here, packaged, but everybody is packaged into the synaptic vesicles and residing at the terminal. Inhibitory based on the neurotransmitter which they are releasing. Yes, we call one neuron to be GABAergic neuron. We give one neuron as acetylcholinergic neuron. It may, barely it happens, but I won't deny that it doesn't happen. Okay, so most of the motor neurons, I mean to say the motor neurons, they are cholinergic in nature. The one which are supplying to your muscles, they are cholinergic and they are excitatory to that.
Mom, do they have blockers like for others to not occur?
No, not the blockers. It's the specificity which makes them very specific.
In the sense, Mom?
In the sense like lock and key. If you want to open a lock, you have to have a particular key of it.
Yes, Mom.
You cannot open and insert every key into it and try to unlock it, right?
Yes, Mom.
It's the same property here also.
Okay.
So receptors are very specific to their neurotransmitters, and they will open only once they have the specific neurotransmitters present there. They will not open even if you say that it is an ECF environment. The outer environment is rich with many of the neurotransmitters. I don't deny. I may have GABAergic neurons. I may have glutamatergic neurons very close to each other. Okay. Yes. But that doesn't mean the neuron which is responding to GABA will respond to glutamate. No, it will not. It's very specific. That's how I started with telling the characteristic feature of a neurotransmitter. It has to go to a specific target. It has to bind to a specific receptor, and it has to have a specific function. Then only it will be termed as a neurotransmitter. Okay? That makes clear to you?
Yes, Mom.
Okay. I hope this diagram clears the picture of what is the way that our neurotransmitters are synthesized. This one here is depicting for the amines and amino acids. And over here, this pathway is showing the synthesis of peptides. Now, let us go to different situations. Here it is the monoamines released. Here it is acetylcholine released. Here it is GABA released. Here it is glutamate released. Since it is too many information in one slide, I will make a halt of 1 minute, and I want you to go through the slides of monoamines first. So let us read about monoamines first. So what is that in monoamines that we have to see here? So this is about the monoamines. Look up here. that there are three distinct transporters who are going to mediate the reuptake of monoamines. So monoamines are being released here. Okay, they are being released from here. If you can see, this is taken from Kendall, I believe. That's why these letters are very, small enough. Maybe now I can make. Can you now read it better?
Yes, ma'am.
This is better, right? So you just take a picture if you want, or means you just try to know this is a presynaptic cell, this is a postsynaptic cell, and what we are talking about is a monoamine being released here. So like glutamate, glycine and all that. So we just think of a monoamine here. Now it is being released here. Now what is happening is I do have, they're talking about dopamine here. So we do have dopamine receptors, DAT, and norepinephrine receptors, NET, and serotonin receptors, SERT, who are responsible for a reuptake or dark blue arrows of their cognate neurotransmitters. And this vesicular monoamine transporter, VMAT, transports all the three aminoamines into the synaptic vesicles for some. Okay, fine. So what they are trying to, basically we are talking about three types of monoamine neurotransmitters. I'm sorry, I took the name of glutamate. Glutamate is out here. What they are talking about is the three monoamines that we know. One is the serotonin, the other is dopamine, the other is epinephrine, norepinephrine. So what is it happening here is these monoamines which are being released, they can be dopamine or serotonin or norepinephrine or epinephrine. They usually have a, what do they mean? They usually have a transport protein here. This is actually a co-transporter. If you can see here, I'll try to magnify. There is a co-transporter here. Co-transporter means along with the neurotransmitter, it will transport even sodium along with it. So this transporter has two binding sites. One for the neurotransmitter, other for its co-transporter. Until unless both of them they bind, you are not going to have the, the movement of these carrier proteins inside. So now what is happening is that these monoamines can be reuptaken with the help of their receptor transport proteins. So we can have dopamine transporters, norepinephrine transporters, serotonin transporters who are going to take them inside the vesicles. And inside the vesicles also there are transporters who are exchangers. This was co-transport. This is anti-transport. Look here. This is an anti-transport. What it means, in exchange of the neurotransmitters getting inside the synaptic vesicles, one hydrogen ion is transported out. And this is with the help of vesicular monoamine transporters. VMA2 is vesicular amine transporter 2. Is it clear to you? So this is one way of reuptaking of the neurotransmitter. I hope I'm making little clear to you. Now let us go for acetylcholine. I think this is the easiest one, right? When acetylcholine is released, this acetylcholine is acted upon by the enzyme acetylcholine esterase, and this esterase enzyme, which is located in the synaptic cleft, it's going to break up my acetylcholine into choline and acetyl-CoA. Choline is taken back into the nerve terminal. See, light blue. It is taken back into the nerve terminal by choline transporter. CH3 is your choline transporter, where the choline transferase enzyme, which is this, is going to act upon between choline and acetyl-CoA, and it will convert the enzyme, this enzyme transferase is going to convert these substrates into a neurotransmitter called as acetylcholine. And this acetylcholine will get into the vesicular membrane, it is through the antipode system. So there will be like entry of the acetylcholine inside, and there will be exit of hydrogen ion. So there is an antipode transport system here, and with the help of these vesicular acetylcholine transporter, the neurotransmitter goes and gets stored inside these vesicles and remain there and wait for the impulse to come and wait for the response to happen. Okay, so that is another way of reuptake of the neurotransmitter. One way was here that whatever was your monoamine, that was co-transported inside and then simply went into the vesicle and got stored there, happily sitting inside the vesicle. Here, what has happened is that the neurotransmitter is actually hydrolyzed, and a substrate of that gets symported inside the vesicles, inside the terminal, and it goes and binds, and with the help of an enzyme transferase, acetylcholine is synthesized, and this neurotransmitter is going to get inside this vesicles, and so this entry of this insulin is with the help of vesicular acetylcholine transport enzyme. So it's an antipode here. So you find that now these vesicles are rich with acetylcholine. Let me get back to you. Okay. Any query right now here? So what we have discussed is A, and then we have discussed about B. A is my monoamine and B is my acetylcholine. What about C? C is a amino acid, isn't it? C is a amino acid we are talking about, isn't it?
Yes,
So who can explain me about monoamine, or anybody who is having any issues and want to get it clarified, you can at least try to explain the monoamine, and that's how you get your doubts cleared. Anybody? Shaili wants to explain. Is Shaili there? Arvi is there. Shaili is there. Yes. Shaili, can you explain me the monoamine system of reuptake? Yes, Shaili, can you see the laser? I'm putting it back. Can you see the laser? This is monoamine system. Tell me what you have understood. Just tell me the whole process of it.
That when the monoamines are released, there's this protein embedded, which there's a blue and pink arrow. So there's this protein embedded through which the reuptake of monoamines happens.
Okay. Do you know about the transport mechanism across the cell membrane? Yes, anybody who can try to explain, I can help you. I can come along. I went to take my pen. Yes. Anyone who is little confident to tell the transport mechanism across the cell membrane? Do you remember the cell membrane proteins?
Yes, ma'am.
So some of them, they act as channels, other act as transporters. This is what a general statement was made.
Right.
Okay. So there may be certain proteins who are going to act as my transporter proteins.
Right.
Do you remember those transporter proteins? Anywhere, it's in the school level we used to do, right? So if you're not able to recall, is anybody who can recall and help me in my job of it? No? Okay. No issue. We'll go back. Okay. Let me just take, I don't know if I can take a whiteboard. I hope this, we are going to talk about the cell transport. Is everybody?
Yes, ma'am. The screen is visible.
It's fine with everyone? You can see this?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Now, when I say about transport mechanism, we have to know that if this is my cell membrane is made up of, what am I drawing? Lipid bilayer, okay? And then I said that there are proteins which are present here as integral proteins. Do you remember this picture? And we said that these are having receptors, they may be a glucose moiety, a carbohydrate moiety present, and they may act as my receptors. There may be proteins who are present through and through. There may be intrinsic protein present. There may be extrinsic protein present. Do you remember this diagram?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. These proteins, they may act either as my channels, where we talk about the channels. They allow the entry and the exit of the ions. They may act as my channels. So we have, what are the famous channels we have talked about? Whom you know by now? What are those ion channels you know right now?
Sodium channels and the
Sodium channels and
potassium channels.
Potassium channel. Okay. Anybody else you know? Something which is present in the presynaptic end?
Calcium channels.
Calcium ion channels. Anything else?
Chloride.
The one which is chloride. Yes, chloride ion channels. So with respect to what we need, we know this, right? Now, These are acting as ion channels. Then there may be even a presence of transport proteins, whom we call as co-transporters. Co-transporters, anti-transporters, symporters, antiporters. Now let me tell you one by one. This is my transport protein. This transport protein has a binding site. It has a binding site here for one, and it has another binding site for another substance. So that particular, so if A is, the binding site of A is here and the binding site for B is here, and if both my A and B, who have to be transported together here, this way of transportation where a substrate is bound along with another substrate and both of them though go in the same direction, we call it as symport. We're into this area where we had this transport protein, and the transport protein has a site for binding of a substance A, and it also has a site for binding of another substance B. When these both are transported together, we call it as symport or co-transport. Okay, we call it as symport or co-transport. Okay, if so happens that my transport protein is only for one substance and it is going to allow only once it is bound to this, it is going to go for that. So this is also a type of transport. Okay, so we won't call it as co-transport, but we'll call it as symport. Okay, it's going towards this. Then we may have certain transport proteins binding for A here and binding for a substance B which is inside. So A will get in exchange of B going out. Okay, this is called as counter transport or antiport. What is it called as? Counter transport or antiport. So this is a type of antiport type of mechanism where A will get inside and B will go outside. In exchange of A, B will go out. Okay, such type of transport is antiport transport. Okay, did you get me, all of you?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, now can you get this? Okay, now
Yes.
I'm back here. Now try to execute now.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so here what we were talking about. Yes, Shaili, now can you explain to me?
Yes, ma'am. So in the case of monoamines, when the monoamines are released, the co-transport mechanism occurs in the transport protein.
So this protein, this transport protein, see, dopamine transporter protein, norepinephrine transporter protein, serotonin transporter protein. So this T stands for the transport protein, okay, or transporter. The word transporter or transport protein, it is referring to the same type of channel. Yes. Next.
Okay. So the reuptake of monoamines occurs. They are going in
This is
the
blue color, monoamine. Along with that, we require another substrate. What is that? Sodium. So there is a symport of sodium along with the neurotransmitter. Next.
And then the antiport.
Then what is the next thing that you want for this neurotransmitter? To be packaged inside these vesicles, right?
Right.
So for them to be packaged, they have to get inside the vesicle.
Right.
And for them getting inside the vesicle, they cannot just simply enter, because here is also a cell membrane, which is again, lipid soluble. It will not allow these things to go inside. It won't allow big ions to go, charged ions to go. So how am I going to go inside? There has to be somebody to facilitate this. So this is another transporter, but this is acting in opposite to each other. Okay. So hydrogen comes out against the entry of the neurotransmitter. So which type of neurotransmitter is this?
Antiport.
This is an antiport transporter. So we don't have to go into detail that this is an anti and symport. We can say simply that there is a transporter here which co-transports the sodium along with the neurotransmitter. Then here is another transporter which transports the amine, monoamine, in exchange to hydrogen. So we call it as vesicular monoamine transporter. Okay. So this is called as vesicular monoamine transporter, and we gave this number as T2. Probably there is one more there. So they named it as monoamine, vesicular monoamine transporter 2. Now, can anybody else try to explain the acetylcholine mechanism? It's very easy here. We have been talking about this in the neuromuscular junction, in chemical transmission, and now here again. Yes, Harshita, try.
Ma'am, I just had a doubt, sorry.
Oh.
This reuptake mechanism, is it after the a new potential is created in the postsynaptic neuron, or is it like simultaneously occurring? Like some acetylcholine is going and getting attached to receptors while the others are getting degraded and are getting...
Usually it happens that once there is a release, there is one thing you have to know. At resting stage also there is a release of neurotransmitters happening. Okay, but the quanta means the quantity of that neurotransmitter which is being released is less as compared to when there is an action potential there. You remember that?
Yes, ma'am.
So if there is an action potential in the presynaptic neuron, there will be, bombardment of these neurotransmitters.
Yes, ma'am.
So once they are bombarded, not everybody will go and bind to the receptors.
Yes,
others will be left in the cleft. So the one who are left in the cleft will try to go for, reuptake or resynthetic mechanism. Covering a bag of chocolates and you hardly have 10-20 kids down there.
Yes, ma'am.
These 10-20 kids are going to hold those substances. Think of them as receptors. They're receiving that. What about the rest of them? The rest will fall in there down, right?
Yes, ma'am.
And they are going to go for recycling.
Okay, ma'am.
Got my theory now?
Yes, ma'am.
This is what is being done. Now the question is, the kids holding those substances, are they going to eat them up or are they going to throw them without eating? Not very clear about it.
But now it would be post-synaptic neurons.
Yes, it will be post-synaptic substance. They have bound to the receptor now.
Okay.
So it's a post-synaptic depolarization current for whatever long period of time. See, long-term potentiation, imagine of those.
Yes,
they're going to go for years together. So we cannot predict that what is going to be the exact fate of it. Whether it's going to get bound to the receptor, remain there for a short period of time, for an intermediate period of time, or they're going to be there for years together. We don't know. Simply it is unknown. Okay. Now, so the neurons which are releasing GABA, we call them as GABAergic neuron. What are the neurons we call them as? GABAergic neuron. So this neuron is a GABAergic neuron. This neuron is what? What about this neuron? What will we call it? Cholinergic neuron, because it is releasing acetylcholine. We'll call it as cholinergic neuron. What do you think should be name for this? Monoaminergic neurons or aminergic neurons. Okay. So this is GABAergic neuron because it is releasing GABA. So this particular neuron, which is GABAergic or glycinergic, either they can release GABA or glycine. For the sake we are talking about is an inhibitory neurotransmitter here. So what we have seen here is a glial cells. Okay. I hope you remember the glial cells. What is a glial cell?
They work as a partner cell for neurons.
Okay, so they are the supporter cells, they are scavenger cells, they are synthesizers, okay, and they even help in the reuptake of the neurotransmitter. They form the blood-brain barrier, so there are multiple functions that the glial cells do. Here also we have a presence of a glial cell very close to the neuron. So usually we know that glia and neuron, they go hand in hand. If I have one neuron, I may have 10 glia surrounding it. So like that is the anatomic situation. So what about this? This is a GABAergic neuron. GABAergic in the sense it is going to release GABA. And we also take an example of glycinergic neuron. Means there will be another neuron very similar to GABA. It has the similar function. So we have kind of combined these two for the sake of explanation. So it may be glycinergic neuron also. Now, GABA transporter, that is here. This is the GABA transporter. So when GABA is released, there is a co-transporter here along with sodium, GABA, and this GABAergic transporter. It is going to transport the GABA inside the terminal. And inside the terminal, we have these vesicular GABA transporters, which very similar to monoamine and acetylcholine, is actually an antiport, and so it will take the GABA inside in exchange to hydrogen. Okay, so I have packets of GABA here. That's fine. This is one way of reuptake which we have learned in case of monoamine and we have learned in case of acetylcholine. Now, what is the other one that we have talked about? Is this. If it is through what you call as glial cells, GABA may also be taken up by the surrounding glial cells with the help of what we call as glial cell transporter. Okay, so this is a GABAergic transporter. GABAergic transporter T3, GABA T3, GAT3. This is GAT1. So this was within the synaptic neuron, but this GAT3, this type of transporter is present in the glial cell. What is it going to do? Again, the symport. Symport of GABA inside along with sodium ions. And in the glial cells, this glutamate is going to get converted. So this the GABA is getting converted into glutamate. So what has happened in the glial cells? In the glial cells, glutamate is converted by the glial, we will have certain enzymes there, glial glutamate synthetase enzyme, GS, glial glutamate synthetase enzyme. So this synthetase is going to synthesize glutamine from the GABA. So now from GABA, sorry, there is one mistake I made here. The GABA gets in, GABA gets converted to glutamate, and glutamate is getting converted to glutamine. Okay, GLN is glutamine, GLU is glutamate. So glutamate gets converted to glutamine in the presence of synthetase enzyme. And this synthetase enzyme is what we are calling as glutamine synthetase enzyme. We call this as synthesase enzyme, glutamine synthetase, which is going to convert the glutamine, from glutamate to glutamine. Now, glutamine is transported to the nerve terminal. This glutamine is transported to the nerve terminal. This transport is again taking against, sodium ions. Now, this is also a symport where sodium gets in along with glutamine, nerve terminals. And what is happening is, see here, it is written here that glutamine transported back to the nerve terminal by the concentrated action of the system N transporter. System N transporter, this is SN, system N transporters, and we have now named these transporters as SN1 and SN2, and the system A transporter, SAT, this is there, SAT, SAT, system A transporters. So system N transporters are going to bring this sodium along with glutamine into the cleft area here, and we have SAT here. SAT here means SAT is my system A transporter, which is going to take this glutamine, and glutamine is going to get transported back into the nerve terminal, and it is getting converted back again. So it is going to get converted to glutamate, and glutamate is going to get degraded or decarbonized into GABA. So decarboxylation will occur, and this is going to get converted into GABA. So we don't have to worry much about this. What is the broad thing that you have to understand from here is that there are transporters present for the transport of neurotransmitters, and these transporters can be symporter or they can be antiporter. Now the cycle for GABA, what they did that, see, so we start with that the GABA which got released will have two ways of getting recycled. One is that it gets transported along with sodium as a co-transport and simply goes into the vesicle and remains there. Or this GABA may be taken up by the nearby glial cells, and this GABA is going to get converted to glutamate, glutamate to glutamine, and glutamine is released And this glutamine which is released is taken back again by the nerve terminal which had released the GABA. And since glutamine is not the neurotransmitter which is going to get released from this neuron, so there will be presence of enzymes PAG and GAD, so decarboxylase enzyme. So what is happening is that this glutamine is getting converted to glutamate, glutamate to GABA, and GABA is stored back again into the vesicle, and then it remains and waits for the signal to come. Is it clear to everyone here?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
So this is about GABA. I think too much of information, but in a simple way, at your level, what you have to understand is that GABA, once released, has two ways of getting reuptaken. Either by the presynaptic cell itself, who has released it, or can be taken up by the nearby glial cells, who are going to again bring it back to the same terminal where it has got released from. So this is about GABA. Now let us go about the glutamate, the excitatory neurotransmitter glutamate. Now what is glutamate going to do? Again the same story. The glutamate is released. Now this glutamate can go back again via its transporter and then go back into the vesicles along with, it's this antipode system and remain there. What is the other fate of it? That after the release from these excitatory neuroterminals, majority of this glutamate may be taken up by these surrounding neuroglial cells. This is a surrounding neuroglial cells, and along the transporter mechanism where sodium is also transported in, glutamate gets into the glial cells, and this glutamate is going to get converted to glutamine, and glutamine is going to go out to the terminal along its receptors like SN1 or SAT receptors, transporters, not receptors, the transporters, and then it is taken back again. Now these, what you call as glutamine again gets converted back. So there is a conversion of glutamine to glutamate. It's converted back to the glutamate at the nerve terminal.